So let's break down hammerstones. Hammerstones are a very important tool when flint knapping, especially when you're learning to flint knap. A lot of people start off flint knapping learning to use copper, but I always recommend learning with hammerstones right up front. What makes a good hammerstone is really a couple different things. Over my years of flint knapping, I've identified 3 shapes of the most ideal hammerstone. We have flats, we have rounds, and we have our egg shapes. These 3 hammerstones and their overall shape provide different advantages when flint knapping. The flats are relatively flat on one side. These give you more of a slap when addressing a platform. You're using the flat side of the stone to slap a platform and reduce the amount of stone off that biface. The rounds are good for holding in between your fingers and really punching into the stone, but you have almost 360 degrees, all different sides that you can really use to really attack the stone as needed. Our egg shapes are held with 4 fingers on one side and your thumb on the back. This gives you more control, and it has what I like to call a longer mass pattern. It has more mass in the depth of the stone, giving you a harder hit, giving you a better punch, and giving you a better reduction in that biface. I have 3 different sizes of flats. It's essentially a river cobble that's been worked over on one side. All of these guys give me the opportunity to slap the stone when I'm in that reduction phase. I have to hold the stone a little bit more along its edges, but it gives me a little bit more focus, gives me a little bit more of a slap going through that reduction process. My egg shapes, or more of those extended masses, these give me a little bit greater punch when I'm reducing stone. I don't have to have a huge cobble that's the size of a grapefruit. Those can be an advantage when really working large spalls and you're trying to reduce them down, but this allows me to take the mass and extend it behind the stone, still generating enough force to remove flakes or even going through that, initial phase reduction. But what I don't have to do is grip this guy like a baseball and give it a hit. It allows me to really focus that energy by really using one of these ends, this end or this end, just like an egg, and giving that stone a pop. Lastly, my rounds are my more baseball or orange shaped, and these are just good little stones to have. They will help you in that reduction process. Now, why these are ideal is that you can really hold them anywhere and figure out that right strike point on the stone if you're looking really to zero in on that platform, or if you're looking to take a little bit more mass off that stone. I usually stick to a couple different sizes for each, whether it's a flat, an egg shape, or a round stone. This gives me the options to play where that platform is and really play and think about how I'm going to go about hitting that stone and removing flakes, or even if I'm in that initial phase of reduction on a large spall. It's important to know over time your stones will break, they will fracture, they will crack. This was essentially a flat that I was using on this side, and it chipped away and broke over time, and it just goes to the debutage pile. Even on some of my larger rounds, you can see this end has been worked, and eventually it gave way and broke off a chunk. You could still use this, but there's plenty of stone options out there. Go pick up a new one, start working with it. Now, what makes a good hammerstone is pretty simple. You want something that is not a knapping stone. You don't want something that is sandstone. You don't want something that is very brittle in nature. What I like to use are good granite river cobbles. So I look for those stones that are on the opposite spectrum of flint knapping stones. Ideal flint knapping stone is glassy, waxy, smooth, and featureless. Well, yes, these are smooth because they've been worked by water and wind and different aspects of erosion, but there's a lot of features in these, and these things are almost glued together. They're hard, they're compact, and this is one of the stones that I seek out when trying to identify desirable hammerstones. Now, when it comes to initially picking the hammerstone, when I'm dealing with large spalls that have a lot of cortex and I'm looking to remove some mass, I'm going to use a big round. This really punches into the stone, it bites into the stone, and it gives me a good amount of force to really break through some of this material and discover what's on the inside. I'm always trying to identify those platforms that are sitting below that center line, and with a hammerstone, I'm not tapping, I'm looking to take the stone and punch it at my right angle into that stone. My stone rests right where it is, pop off those flakes. Those 2 broke, but I was able to take these 2, this large bulbous end that you see here, and already start to flatten it out. There's no need to abrade when you're doing this initial phase, because you got to remember, you're not hitting the edge of the stone. I'm always hitting above that edge because that's where the stone is. I'm looking to thin this out and reduce it. This initial strike will be into the stone, never the edge. So since this little chunk right here is a little bit thinner and this stone covers a lot more material, this is where I would switch to something like one of my egg shapes. Knowing that I have a smaller strike point, I can really narrow in where I want to hit this guy, still having the mass, but it focuses my point of impact. So I'm going for right about here. Nice clean flake off the backside. That right there is a good workable flake. This is where it was. That's where I hit the stone and yielded a pretty nice result. So as I'm working the stone, I've got a little bit thinner amount of stone. I still want to remove mass, but I don't want to go into these big huge chunks. I can switch to more of my eggs and a combination of my rounds. As I look at this guy, I can kind of see this is a little platform right here, and I'll look to remove this mass. A little bit smaller egg shaped, and I'm going to attack this platform, this corner if you will, and try to aim to remove a flake over here. I always like to tap and touch. It gives me good hand, eye, and stone relationship. And when I strike, I hit the stone and I punch through it. I'm not tapping and recoiling. I'm tapping and just keeping that stone right there. I'm allowing that force, supporting the back of the stone, giving it a pop. There we go. That's the flake scar that was removed. That flake kind of broke up, but I've just now reduced that hard angle on this stone. Hammerstones, all hammerstones, can be used to give yourself some abrasion. Now again, I don't need to necessarily abrade because I'm hitting the edge. I'm just abrading to remove some of the sharpness. There we go. Decent flake. All that cortex has kind of come off. Save that flake. Again, I'm still using my egg. I've got the force stacked up behind it instead of rounded where I could accidentally take off a larger chunk. Nice little flake pops off. No issues. I'm going to actually come here, try to take a chunk off this way to raise this edge up to address this. So right here. Good. Most of that cortex off this top side, just looking to thin it out. Remember, I was a little bit more rounded. Now it's getting way flatter. Your egg shapes are really your best when it comes to reduction. They give you the biggest bang for your buck, in my opinion. You can do more with them. More importantly, the mass is elongated. It's not as bunched up, and you're not as removing as much stone. Let's take one of the flakes and use some of these flat stones. And these are really great when you're still needing to do some percussion, because you can use them as an abrader. Kind of that one tool. Abrade all my edges, give them a little reinforcement. And just on this guy right here, this one single flake, I'm going to use this percussion stone to drive some flakes this way. I'm working and using a little bit thinner stone, but it gives me the opportunity to still use hard hammer percussion on thinner flakes. There we go. Just by smacking it, smacking the stone, I'm not catching a lot of the stone, I'm just smacking the edge and ripping the flake off, almost like soft hammer percussion. This allows me to still use a hard hammer percussion device like one of these hammerstones, one of these flat hammerstones, and still remove those flakes. Again, I'm going to slap. There we go. There we go. Kind of tilt my stone. There we go. Remove some of that. Flake. So those flakes are still thin when you're slapping that stone, and you can still use this, a flat stone, just by understanding where that slap point is, which is typically up and around this front side. And when I hit the edge, I'm just slapping it and striking through. Good flake. Another good flake. And then just after a few minutes, you can work your stone flake with a flat stone using, yes, the flat sides to smack and then these edges to abrade and reduce and give rough shape. This can be a really simple way to, reduce flakes just like you would with soft hammer percussion, producing long, flat flakes. And then in a short period of time, you can work that flake that once was, you know, a little bulbous into a pretty easy preform, some light pressure flaking that will work well on an arrow or even an atlatl dart point. So whether it's a round stone, an egg-shaped stone, or even something like a flat stone, all three of these shapes really serve different purposes. Round stones, again, for that large scale, those big pops, really reducing stone in large quantity. Your egg shapes do almost the exact same thing, but they extend that mass behind the stone, or if that stone comes to a rounded point, it allows you to focus in that strike with a whole lot more accuracy, reducing the amount of hammerstone that actually comes in contact with that large spall. Lastly, these little flat stones. These are really great when you're addressing flakes. It allows you to really take the flat edge of this, smack off little platforms, reducing it down, throwing some long, thin flakes, giving you almost the same advantage as some sort of soft percussive device. Bottom line, when trying to choose those hammerstones and understanding what they're used for, it's best to really have those round shapes, those egg shapes, and those flats. Pick a couple up that really work well for you, feel good in the hand. Will they break and chip away over time? Absolutely, but the beautiful thing about hammerstones and, you know, really identifying those ideal ones is there's tons of them out there. All right, that's it for hammerstones. Word of advice, if someone's selling hammerstones online, avoid buying them. They're picking them up anywhere they find them. Get out there, walk some riverbeds, go to your local rock yard, your local supermarket where they've used the stones as landscaping. Ask them if you can take one or two, and you'll find some pretty good hammerstone options. All right, that's it for hammerstones. Appreciate you watching.